The Train Trouble, a journey of mistaken identity. There was this one time when my cousin Mark and I were taking a long-distance train ride across the country. Mark is a big guy, about 6'3", and not exactly the easiest person to fit into tight spaces. We were heading back home after a weekend trip, and our train ride was supposed to be around 8 hours, but of course we didn't get seats together because we booked last minute. I ended up with a window seat in a regular cabin, nothing special but bearable. Mark, however, got stuck in one of the old-style, cramped compartments where the seating arrangements were worse than airline economy. He had to share the space with 3 other passengers, all of whom were sitting with their elbows sticking out, luggage stacked everywhere, and no legroom to speak of. For someone as tall as him, it was like a nightmare. He couldn't even stretch out his legs, so he was practically folded up like a human accordion. About 2 hours into the ride, I see him shuffle down the aisle to visit me, hunched over like he's aged 40 years in a single ride. The man looks miserable, so I suggest he stretch his legs a bit in the lounge car. We head that way and spend some time chatting when this friendly, older conductor passes by. She looks at Mark with a bit of concern, like she can just feel his discomfort. "Are you all right, sir?" she asks. Mark, being polite, just shrugs and says he'll manage. The conductor gives him a sympathetic smile and then strolls off. But a few minutes later, she comes back with this glimmer in her eye. "You know," she says, "there's an empty cabin in the premium section, and I just can't stand to see someone suffering like this. If you two want, I can move you there for the rest of the journey, no extra charge." We couldn't believe it. He gave up his seat. So, for the next few hours, Mark and I enjoyed the peace and quiet, snacked on complimentary treats, and watched the scenery roll by in comfort. But as we're settling in, I notice a man in a sharp suit down the corridor giving us an odd look. I figure maybe he's jealous or just curious. He walks over, peeks in, and then abruptly asks, "Excuse me, what are you two doing in my reserved cabin?" Uh-oh, we both freeze, and I realize the mistake. This wasn't just any premium cabin. This was his cabin. Before I can say anything, the conductor comes rushing back and starts apologizing profusely. Turns out there was a misunderstanding. The cabin had been double booked, and we were now sitting in a reserved space. Mark and I started to pack up, thinking our first-class experience was over before it even began. But the man, to everyone's surprise, chuckles. "You know what? It's all right, I'll grab a drink in the lounge. You guys can enjoy the cabin." We couldn't believe our luck. Grateful, we follow her to this luxurious private cabin with plush seats, enough legroom for Mark to stretch out entirely, and even a little table for us to enjoy snacks. I thought it was too good to be true. When we got to our destination, we ran into the guy again at the station. I thanked him for being so generous, and he just smiled and said, "Well, you look like you needed it more than I did." Now, I'd love to say that Mark and I learned some deep lesson about kindness and generosity that day, but honestly, we just walked away feeling like we'd won the lottery. And that, folks, is the story of how a giant mistake turned into the best train ride of our lives.